So with that, thank you everyone for joining today's webinar. We're so excited to have you here for our webinar on why ad-free is lazy, the case for podcast ads. So before we begin, we always have those obligatory housekeeping items. So please note all participants are muted. However, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A chat. And like I said before, if you have any comments, you can put them in the chat if you want to interact with anyone. And then lastly, I always say this is kind of the question that will be on every webinar bingo card, but this webinar will be recorded. So if you want to rewatch it or share with any colleagues, please look out for that email in your inbox. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to Christina Rubino, who is our GM of our offline marketing practice. So Christina, take it away.
Thanks, Amanda. For those of you who know us only via our work in offline and audio, and you're not familiar with Right Side Up more broadly, we're a collective of marketing specialists who have helped more than 1,000 companies hit and exceed their growth goals. We have expertise across all marketing functions, including performance, lifecycle, SEO, social, analytics, and creative, just to name a few. I joined Right Side Up in 2018 after a long career in integrated and digital media to start a different kind of offline and audio marketing entity that values transparency and is consistent with an in-house ethos. So contrary to most offline agencies, we help clients build the function as an internal competency. What that means is establishing direct relationships with media properties and networks and measurement partners for our advertisers. We create tailored strategies and we manage channels end to end with senior talent. We craft highly customized media plans that are rooted in a deep understanding of clients' business drivers and unit economics. And having invested now well over $250 million in podcast advertising alone, I would be remiss if I didn't say that we certainly have a vested interest in today's topic. We'll cover the trade-offs and opportunities that both subscription-based monetization and ad monetization bring to the table, why we're firm believers that the medium can continue to thrive with a balanced reliance on multiple revenue streams. And with that, I am thrilled to have Brian Barletta, a partner at Sounds Profitable, joining us today. Brian, if you want to do like a quick intro.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here. So I'm Brian Barletta, founder of Sounds Profitable. We're a trade association for the podcast industry. We work with, I think it's as of today, 185 partners and continuing to grow every single month. We try to grow this space through both listenership and monetization. And I'd say 99% of the things that we do are free, and all of the things we do benefit the entire industry. And I'm honestly really excited to be here because I am a big fan of what Christina and team have been doing, because they do exactly what we do. They share everything. It's here's what you need to know, why you need to know it, and how to utilize it so that everybody can succeed. Because this is a small space where everybody can succeed if you pay attention.
Well said. With that, let's actually, why don't we, before we kick off Q&A, Brian and I are going to keep it more casual and just like ask each other questions and hopefully get to some good answers for everybody. But before we do that, let's start with a quick poll. We'll throw that up on the screen here and ask everybody to participate if you are. Oh, there we go. Okay. All right. All of the above.
Oh, I'm really disappointed. I went to click it and it said hosts and panelists can't vote.
Yeah. You don't get a
That's
choice.
surprising.
Like,
I guess not.
No. Yeah. I mean, I don't care. Just give me my content is clearly a response that I wrote for anybody who joined that knows me. Awesome. Well, I think we can close it. I think it's pretty clear that the overwhelming winner here is host read ads. And I am pretty sure, I'm gonna stop sharing and share the results. And I'm gonna get out of it. I know how to use the internet, by the way. I'm super good at it. But yeah, I don't think that surprises me at all from a listener's perspective. And I doubt it surprises you either, Brian.
No. And that's a lot of what we wanted to dig in today. I mean, like podcasting, the joke is always podcasting is an intimate medium channel, right? But there's nothing like it. There's nothing like it in other medium, like even other social like influencer content doesn't hit like podcasting. And so that relationship between the brands and publishers, I think, is probably the best part about this space because they're involved and active in it. And what we're going to dig in today, I think we went for the sensationalist, grab attention headline, but it's really to hear about what these leading advertisers want, these people that Right Side Up are working with, and Right Side Up's direct experience on it, what they want related to ads and why ad-free might not be your best option going forward.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think advertising, at least in the US, continues to be the leading source of revenue for most podcasts. And it beats out subscriptions, it beats out live events, merch, anything else you can think of. And I think it's because advertising and podcasting hits different, right? So it's like the host or the publisher gets to choose their level of involvement with different types of advertising. The benefit on our end of the table is that advertisers get to participate in an increasingly popular, highly effective channel that they probably consume themselves, that quite frankly works on even jaded people like me who know that I'm listening to ads and I'm still like, ooh, I really think I need that. And also, listeners get free content that they can consume whenever and wherever they want, with new options popping up every single day. So it's a healthy ecosystem. And we'll get into why advertising is a really important part of monetization. Not the only part, not the only valid part, not really what's driving the sole source of revenue in the space, but what continues to be a driver for the success and monetization of the channel overall.
Yeah, I'm excited to dig into all these pieces here. We're building up to that main topic here, and I think we wanted to start, I guess, kind of coming out swinging here. The number of brands and dollars that Right Side Up has worked with in podcasting, do you guys invest more in partners who treat the medium as endorsement first versus those who are just selling advertising inventory?
Yes. And I'll expand. But yes, overwhelmingly. And what we've seen is that as different companies go in and out of treating the medium as endorsement first, I can point to different inflection points at where like certain content creators, companies, networks, publishers have embraced that model or kind of gone away from that model. And I can literally chart with a lot of them how our spend has fluctuated. And we actually we did a whole creative analysis article, and I think we're prepared to share it here, that shows that personalization does help performance. And what was really interesting on this one for me is we had this hypothesis going in that not only was it personalization, but it was only embedded, right? That only embedded ads really drive performance. And by the nature of them, they're going to be host read, they're going to be, highly customized usually to the content. What we actually
Yeah.
found was 3 out of 7 advertisers saw DAI perform better. 3 out of 7 advertisers saw embedded perform better, and 1 advertiser had no real difference in performance. And in cases where DAI outperformed embedded ads, there was a strong correlation to lower CPMs for DAI, or dynamically ad inserted inventory. But what I think is interesting is that shows that personal endorsement and endorsement in general is the way. The mechanism by which it's served or embedded is also important, but in as much as it's relevant to the pricing model of that inventory. I'm very fond of saying that everything works for a price, and that absolutely holds true in audio.
And just to like put a bow on that, so
Yeah.
when presented the right way to you, like a publisher presenting that inventory to you, if they're like adamant on doing it a very specific way, what you're saying is it's not a no, it's what the cap is, what the ceiling is on testing it, because you have the research and the experience to back up like your risk tolerance on trying it out.
Exactly. And part of it also is like, we know we buy so much in this medium. There were months coming up that were projected to invest like well in excess of 8 figures. And when you think about that, we work with hundreds of networks and publishers, thousands of shows on an annual basis. So we know exactly what we're willing to take on in terms of risk, to your point. And when we get inventory pitched to us that's like, hey, it's going to be run of network, it's going to be produced, it's going to be this, it's going to be that. Absolutely. But then our pushback inevitably as buyers is, great, so here's the CPMs I'm willing to pay for that. That is more like streaming spoken word audio, for lack of a better comparison point. And so we're going to want to see that inventory priced similarly to that. And I think this is important for publishers to keep in mind. When we RFP, we get sometimes we have hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars in media options for a given plan. And so we prioritize inventory based on pricing, based on structure, based on, the quality that we know that certain hosts deliver in their ad reads. Like, it's all just an equation. And this is where it gets into art and science. There's a healthy amount of math in it, but as we all know, like, there is no one research partner like an MRI or Nielsen Intelligence or whatever that's going to get in there and be like, here's exactly where your audience is. So in lieu of that, you rely on clear signals like performance for performance advertisers. You rely on pricing, on, basically on all the data that networks report to us in order to make those decisions.
I want to pause for a second here on this. Like, this is so much great data that you guys are providing. This is so much candid nature on here. I feel like the industry is moving towards this. I think you guys are a big leader in this, like the transparency on this. For years, it's felt like this type of conversation has been private, right? Like, people didn't want to have it in public. But I think we're all realizing that, like, the benefit here is that we're all on the same page. We want everybody to succeed. And it's not secret necessarily. You're not going to share like the specifics of how you've optimized every little detail and like what specific category works for what, but you're here to say, like, there are levers we can all pull, and we're happy to negotiate the conversation, but like, we have to treat each other like equals. I'm not driving the price down to like
Correct.
Get one over on you. I'm saying this is what you're offering, and this is the best I can do to make it work.
Yes. And on the flip side, I'm going to use a fancy word, or words actually. Information asymmetry has been prevalent in the space since almost the very beginning. And while there are certainly good actors in the ecosystem, a lot of agencies have made a lot of money by holding a lot of these details very close to their chest. Part of it's out of fear, because when you look at the traditional agency model, what becomes apparent, and part of why I started the practice at Right Side Up, is that it's all comparative advantage, right? You go back to the basics of business. It's comparative advantage, right? Different tools, different that, whatever. It's all a version of different flavors of the same ice cream, right? And I'm over here and I'm like, would you like some gelato or sorbet? It's just a different way of looking at this industry, where I'm like, yeah, I'll tell you, if you go on the Right Side Up's blog, I have given away more of our playbook than I've ever seen any agency in the space give away. And my thing is, go and try it on your own. Give it a shot. I know that my hit rates are better in terms of testing, right? Industry average is somewhere around 20 to 30% renewal rates. Ours hover regularly around 30 to 40%. I know we're better at it. And it's that kind of confidence in our offering and our team that lets me get out there and talk about some of the problems in the industry that are frankly going to affect the entire ecosystem. And the other point I'll make on it is sharing performance as much as you can with partners is something that a lot of agencies are really scared of.
Yeah.
And I know why. I know that they're like, well, if they know that the inventory is performing really good, they're going to raise our rates. Well, then you're working with the wrong partners. And forgive me for saying it, your partnership with all these people is pretty shitty. If that's what you're scared of, and you're like, oh man, like if I really tell them that like this style of advertising works or that style of advertising works, like, and this show works really well for this particular advertiser, at the end of the day, everybody wants to get to renewals. Everybody wants to get to a sustainable, scalable, predictable stream of revenue, including advertisers, including publishers. And if we can all just come at it from that perspective, it becomes a really open dialogue where we can share back and forth. And the ultimate goal is just, let's do the best we can for the advertisers and the campaign, and then like go home and do whatever else you want to do with your life.
Yeah. And that mindset of sharing this type of data, like you said, like, I love that you're saying like, we're sharing it because we're doing great at it, like go ahead and do it yourself. It's also that when we all get on the same page, and this is going to be a big initiative for us this year, Right Side Up's going to be partnering with us, and a lot of the buyers that we're working are going to partner up with us on it. There's some things that everybody's kind of doing the same, and if we just put it out in public, we can stop having the same conversations over and over again. The amount of times the buyers that we work with, the agencies, the consultants, the brands themselves tell me that they have the same conversations campaign after campaign with the same publishers. We got to get through that, because that's part of also why a lot of the buyers don't want to share that information. It's not necessarily, like you said, it can lead to be because they want to raise the rates, and I agree that that's a bad relationship. Sure. But it's just as much the fact of like, if you share that data, how many other conversations does it spark? How much more time does it eat up? And we have to be precious of our time. So it's I think setting this level expectation, sharing that data is more often to help you understand that they're doing you a favor and that like the longevity of the campaign, while you might be spiking now, you might drop later and you're earning goodwill by not raising the rates because they're also not going to lower it, then it is likely for you to be able to raise your rates on and on and on, right? Like
it's that. And then the other part of it is just because you're meeting or exceeding a client's goal doesn't necessarily mean that like the media is profitable for them. Some
yeah,
clients, I mean, this has been historically more of a case in 2021 and 2022, but there are a lot of clients and advertisers who prioritize growth at maybe not all costs now, but for years, growth at all costs was a mantra for a lot of companies, right?
yeah,
So that's how you kind of saw like things bubble out a little bit.
yeah,
Part of that was, like I'm not going to get into, there's a lot of people smarter than me that have talked about like the venture capital and PE bubble of investment and all of that. But like the TLDR on it is just because something is meeting the goals for the campaign doesn't necessarily mean that it's exceeding or meeting the goals for the entire company. This might be
yes,
a test channel, right? And we might be willing to set an allowable customer acquisition cost or CAC of 3x our other channels because we know we're in the testing phase. Well, just because you clear that hurdle, when we start optimizing to 2x and 1.5x and 1 and eventually try and bring that down, which is what good marketers do, it's at that point that you're going to get yourself in trouble if you
yeah,
raised rates to be out of sync with the performance that we're looking at. And
yep,
it differs for, it differs for different
every
types of
brand,
ads and
yeah.
creative.
Yeah, and well, speaking of creative there, I mean, I think that the industry, we talk so much about extremes, right? And I think that we do conflate both the creative type and the delivery method, right? Baked in or embedded versus
Yes.
like DAI, and then host endorsed versus like scripted announcer. And so those are different things and there are different combinations here, but we kind of talked a little bit about host endorsed live reads. So where it's integrated into the content, it's not added after the fact because there's just like a natural flow and it feels like content, it really does. And scripted announcer reads, which you said have their place like you do buy in streaming audio and other spoken word audio. Are we missing like a third or even fourth option?
Probably, but and there's some other options. Like brand spots are always an option. They're best when they're produced and deployed specifically for the medium versus
Yeah,
when it's like the reuse of a radio ad and like the announcer talks like this and you're like, what the hell is that? But on the flip side, like the CPMs for that have to be cheaper or it's not going to work. We're always open and looking for custom segments, but the opportunities are really scattered. And then
yeah,
what winds up happening is that something happens when we RFP out and we go, we're looking for custom opportunities. It's like, you remember the old Looney Tunes, like the dollar signs in people's eyes? Like
yeah.
the amount of like throw shit at the wall, like, let's see if they'll buy this when we start to RFP in that direction. Like I try and remind people that it's like brand advertisers measure shit. I don't know, I'm cursing today, but like surprising no one.
We're
Brand
gonna be explicit on Apple Podcasts with this one.
Yes, it's E-rating. Just call me Nikki. So when we think about like when we send out custom RFPs, and we've done a lot of this for some of our clients, brand advertisers measure shit. They just don't measure the same metrics as performance marketers. The other thing is they're measuring on a much longer time horizon, right?
Yeah.
So I'm looking at 3, 6, 12-month revenue with a lot of our advertisers when we're investing on their behalf. Brands might be looking at like a 2-3 year horizon, and they might be looking at like, I have a background in CPG and pharma, and they're looking at like, these were our sales numbers last year, this year, next year, et cetera. They're looking at a different, you know, a different time horizon and level of spend that might make you think, oh, we can like throw some spaghetti at the wall and see if it sticks. The challenge there is like, I don't want to call it greedy, but like when you get a little greedy with your pricing in those situations, it it becomes out of line with value creation. And at the end of the day, advertising is trying to sell products to create value for companies. Like that is literally, that's what we're trying to do here. And so when we think about creating new ads, we have to understand why like produced ads don't always work well. And it's usually because we're eroding trust in content. Like, who is this random ass person that's telling me to buy something? Like, that's not the host that I listen to, and blah, 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 blah. And that's when you start to see efficacy decline historically. And what's really interesting is another call out from that article we shared earlier. The not so secret sauce that I really wish people would hone in on more in podcast creative is the use of testimonial style personal endorsements. So in that same, we basically took $3 million in media spend that we knew was stable, that we knew was measured properly, like we controlled for other variables. And we saw reads with personal endorsement outperform ads without personal endorsement for 6 out of 7 advertisers. And the only exception to that was an advertiser in health and supplement that didn't require PE from hosts. And so if there is another ad type that can be created that embraces personal endorsement and helps monetize the medium in a way that feels very authentic to the medium, like we're sitting here ready to buy it. But inevitably, when we go back and forth and we negotiate, it's a host read mid-roll that's ad served embedded or dynamically inserted for a 1 week or 1 month flight, hopefully with a frequency cap, though I know that term scares everybody. It's the same shit that we wind up buying over and over again. And that's because it works. So until something works like that, I don't know. It's gonna be hard.
I definitely have received like a Tracy Morgan ad, like a true celebrity, and I listened to it multiple times, and I was like, I don't know how I feel about this. I don't know if it did anything new for me. Like what happens if it's a miss on who the celebrity is? But you're right. I mean, and also I don't think you meant that as like an insult. Like I think you'd rather someone know that they can do the host read endorse competently, and you're like, I love custom content. Be like, we can nail this, and we have nailed it for you. Everything over there is just
Oh,
going to be too spaghetti
take
at the
my
wall, like you
money.
said. Yeah,
Yeah, like please take my money.
yeah,
Like we literally RFP'd out. There were a few times this past year where we RFP'd out for like truly custom wackadoo. Let's create a segment. Let's do like sponsored content, et cetera. And some partners, to their credit, were really realistic about it. Even some came back to us and they were like, this just sounds like an ad that we would do. Do you want us to just call it something else? And I was like, oh, I love you. Like, thank you for
yeah.
bringing that level of production and attention and consideration to the game. Like that's what we're looking for. And another interesting thing is there's an opportunity that we don't talk about a lot for podcasters to earn basically, I don't want to call them royalties, but close enough to where advertisers are always looking for creative to use in paid social, right? So when you go to TikTok or whatever your platform of choice is, and you start scrolling, you might see an influencer or a celebrity or somebody doing like a very podcasty looking ad. And inevitably, it's either because that's the ad format that the brand has paid them for, or it's a reuse from video or podcast where the brand is basically negotiating rights to run it across the board. So there might be room for a third ad type where it's like if you get that kind of personal endorsement in there,
Yeah.
you might be able to like actually charge a little more for the spot, but then charge based on usage rights, which is kind of unexplored for podcasters.
Yeah, I'm excited by things like that, by exploring things like that. And the custom stuff, like I think it's fun to explore, but I think it's okay to say like we can fit it into what we normally do. We can nail this for you there. Continuing with, so we kind of recapped like the different creative types and why these are appealing. We've talked about the data aspect on it here, but I think we're in this phase. I hope you can agree that we've at least, past the crest of aggressive inventory management. I think there's still a few places out there that are a little bit too much, and it happens, right? But I think that more often than not, people are evaluating, like, do you need 12 ad slots, right? Like, what is the value there? Are you benefiting everybody on there? And more importantly, managing it, right? Like that creative host read endorsed live read, the thing that's built into the content, like is more valuable. You made that clear there. But in the last few years, and I honestly will admit that I'm guilty of some of these things on the technology side, seeing like not explaining enough of how we should think about this stuff, but like people have removed ads, right? Whether allowed in the contract or not, there was this perception that you would make in an ad and then you would, after a certain period of time, remove it, and you'd be able to do a lot of programmatic ads and dynamic ad insert, not even programmatic, just dynamic ad insertion. You could serve your own inventory on there. What I wanted to ask you about is like, we know how the advertisers feel about it. Like, I mean, ideally, if they bought it forever, it stays in there forever. That's violating the contract if not. But we don't talk a lot about how it impacts the listener.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on that? Like going from like a baked in live read to just whatever is available run of network.
I think it's, and this is why, like, I understand the impetus for certain podcasts and hosts to be like, I do want to go ad free because we all, I don't even need to say the publisher's name. They get,
We could all hear
frankly,
it in our heads.
I know it's, it really is. There are a few companies, not people. There are a few companies. The personification of companies is something we're not going to get into on today's webinar, but there's a few companies that have just belabored the point of ads. And I understand the natural reaction being like, well, then we're just going to go subscriber supported, ad free. And frankly, I get it. I think there's room for us to continue to monetize this medium in a way that feels very authentic to listeners. When you are embedding, what the most egregious example that I've had in the last 6 months was somebody reaching out to me because they wanted to let us know that they were moving to, it was 1 pre-roll and 2 blocks of 3 mids each and a post roll. So it was 8 ads for 29 minutes of content. So do the math on that. And these mids are 60 seconds each, carry the 1. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you're just like, I don't know, guys. Like, when you embed that many ads, I'm talking about embedding, not like in the context of like embedding, but like when you embed that many ads into content, period, you are going to see attention drop off. You are going to make the whole thing feel more transactional. And frankly, I kind of think the same of subscription models when it's like, when the bulk of responsibility is on the listener to support the creation and continuation of a show, I've actually heard people publicly talk about like, it turned me off to the podcaster because they were always asking me for money. And it's like, well, I mean, first of all, nothing is free. And when you're not sure what the product is and how these people are making money, the answer is it's you. Whether it's because they're selling ads to advertisers, because you're listening to the show, or you're subscribing and helping monetize the content, like the answer is you. And another really interesting thing, audiences often like podcast ads, which is insane to me. They actually remark on ads being like an enjoyable experience. There's compilations on YouTube. Like, I always go back to Bill Burr on this because like I'm a big Burr fan, but also like his ad reads are genuinely hilarious.
It's content.
And there are moments, it's content. You can see the moment that he goes off script sometimes where like whatever is going on between his eyes just goes off script and you're like, oh, like honestly, as an advertiser, sometimes you're like, oh shit, what's he gonna say? And as a listener, you're like, oh shit, what's he gonna say? And there's an ad that I always think of that he starts questioning why he's doing this for money in the middle of the ad. And it's phenomenal. And it's got like hundreds and hundreds of thousands of views on YouTube. So when you think about that, it's like, well, the advertiser didn't pay for that. If people
I think the
believe
advertiser
host
did
take
pay
on-
for it. But I think that's the thing. I think that people forget about
That's
this.
true.
I think that like
That's
when
true.
podcasting exploded in some really interesting ways, and no matter how much you're upset about the thing, like not you, the royal you, are upset about the things that happen with layoffs and the expansion and downsizing of certain things. I think like what Spotify did, fast forwarded 5 years of pain into 1 year. Was that fun? No, but would it be really fun right now if we were dragging it out? Also no. We got here because of those endorsements, because it was content, because dynamic ad insertion wasn't as bought into at that point, and the advertisers wanted that unique thing, and you are entertaining your audience and the advertiser. You're giving them a reason to continue working with you. And so this pushback that we've seen of like a host read, and it's just like, cool, pick 3 from this bullet point, pick 3 from that one, and then they read it and it's dry. It's like, man, put as much effort into it as the segment that you just had before it, right? Like, make it content. That's why someone's buying it for you, because they can absolutely make it work as spoken word announcer read at a low enough price point, and there's someone selling your inventory low enough to make it work, but they would
And
rather
shareholders
pay it right
for
to you.
certain companies. Oh,
Yeah.
sorry, Brian, I didn't mean to.
No, but that you're right. You're like, dig in.
The shareholders for certain companies will be ecstatic because when you look at like, let's just take a random radio company that I definitely haven't mentioned at all on this webinar, right? let's just take a company that's publicly traded that owns a shitload of radio stations that literally is like looking at their ACPMs in whatever, whatever range they're normally seeing. If you can monetize podcast and you're this company at a $10 to $12 effective CPM, you're now lifting your overall inventory by probably $1 or $2. You think shareholders aren't going to be stoked on that? You think public markets aren't going to be stoked on that? Some of the companies in this medium are doing things at a different scale and a different and with different back end reasons and rationale than most of the small to mid-sized publishers that are like, well, I like my $30 CPMs. And the answer is, I don't mind paying them, but I'm not going to pay them for ad stuffing, for ads without personal endorsement, for ads where, like, one of the interesting trends lately has been, well, we're not going to do show level exclusivity anymore. And we might not even do episode level exclusivity. We're going to give you host read, like host exclusivity. So what you're telling me is if a podcast is hosted by 3 people, one of them could read for one advertiser that's in a competitive category, another one could read for another one, and another one could read for another one. I'm sorry. I don't care how many supplements, bedding and linens, mattresses, whatever. All that you're doing is eroding the listener's trust in the content. If those make it into the same episode, it just sounds like, oh, they're just ads. And now you're eroding the value of the experience for everybody, which is not good.
And that's, it's also like a pipe dream, right? Like the belief that you, like, I wish we were selling out of inventory like crazy. I would love for people to consolidate and have less ad units, sell that out, and then expand where it makes sense and have those conversations with partners. Because if I did have 4 units and it was selling out and I came to you and I said, I need to add 1 or 2 more, could you give me your feedback on where it could be that wouldn't impact things? I'm sure buyers would be open to that. Well, like that, putting that in there and saying that, like, it's not that those 3 hosts actually have unique deals with different supplement companies. It is the promise that maybe someday we could get all of their business and we don't have to say no to anything. It doesn't happen. Like, I think, and this is like ripping out the ads and stuff too, not just for subscription, which we're about to finally get into that subscription side here, but when that advertiser buys that ad in there and removing it for the hope of filling it with 3 dynamically inserted ads because it's now a 6-month-old episode or whatever it is. Like, there's a fantasy podcast about I don't want to get into it too much. There's a fantasy podcast that's been on for years that I was excited to get back into. The first episode is like 17 minutes. I had to stop listening to it because there were just so many ads stuffed into it. And it's not something I could just listen to the newest episode. Like, there's story and I wanted to catch up on it and all of this stuff. And they decided that the older it got, the more ads they were going to put in there. I probably could have been another 100 downloads for them. I probably could have been one more person reminding people of it and recommending it. But they broke my trust, right? And the advertisers that are built in there, like, is MailChimp still in Serial? Wasn't that a big thing? Didn't they pull it out of the first season or something like that?
That's a great question.
I believe,
I don't know, actually.
I would love if anybody in the chat can correct us, but like, I thought I heard that they pulled it out. And like, when I think of Serial, I think of the MailChimp, right? Like,
You think of MailChimp.
it's like
yes,
it's like a cool, fun feeling. It was why we picked MailChimp as our ads, like our newsletter source when we started Sounds Profitable, because I had like, oh, they supported podcasting. These things matter, right? That association matters, and that when someone wants that baked in there, when someone wants it embedded, like, there's a reason. And you can go the other way, like Christina's saying, but like, I don't know. I think that we do a lot of things on the promise and the hope of maximizing everything possible. But when you're selling at 50% of your inventory, maybe you have too much unsold inventory, and maybe you don't need more unsold inventory. Maybe you need to figure out on how to get it full and how to make the people happy and then regrow. Maybe we need to shrink before we grow again.
I think that's going to wind up happening. And then what's
Absolutely.
really interesting,
I think it is happening. Yeah.
I think it's already happening. I mean, also, again, I won't throw another different, larger publisher under the bus, but when they came to us late last year and they were like, guys, we're going to do a different ad type, get ready. And we're like, what? Embedded ads. I laughed on the call I was like, you're joking. Oh my God. Like, thank you for like, basically, discovering something that was already there the whole time. I know exactly who is emoji reacting in the chat, and it's got to be somebody from my team. Hi Alex, hi Becky. But really, like, my question, and then I want to move on to rethinking ad free, because I do think that, like, all of this is setting up why we think, Brian and I both think, that the right monetization for this medium continues to be a balanced approach. My question to you is, like, yes, like, obviously advertisers pay and continue to pay a premium for embedded ads, for ads that are left in episodes for a certain amount of time. My question is, like, can somebody do a study, or do you have any idea on how much incremental monetization publishers really gain by stripping ads 30 days after an episode runs? Is it more than the upcharge that advertisers are willing to pay for ad-served embedded content?
If there is a publisher in the room who would like to dig into that with us, Sounds Profitable would be happy to help out with that and anonymize it, and like,
We'll
literally
participate.
anything.
Yeah.
And I think, God, I mean, like, you can tell the hard cost. The editor has to go in and edit the file. You have to re-upload it. In
That's another
YouTube, you're
thing people don't
reducing
think
it.
about.
There's the hourly cost. I mean, I think when we get into the hourly costs on a lot of things, I think the buyers and like the consultants and agencies are going to have, it's going to be a rude day when we have to figure out the hourly costs of all of you into ROI if people want to keep going down those routes. But yeah, I agree with you. I think I'm almost comfortable saying that it is a very rare thing for that to benefit anybody.
Ooh,
I think, yeah.
We have a
No,
good
go for it.
question / point. Trevor, oh, hi, Trevor. Trevor Baru said, I think there's more value than you think with being able to use the back catalog to your advantage. When you remove old ads, it gives you flexibility to give added value to current advertisers or run more powerful campaigns focused on seasonality like Mother's Day. It can still be host-read and feel embedded. Doesn't have to be 30 days, but say 3 to 6 months later. I think there's, oh no, Brian.
Why can't you add another ad slot? If there's something that's important, like, and if a publisher absolutely was out of inventory, I think that, like, having that, like, is it better to remove an ad slot, an advertiser, and use that slot and the effort that goes into it, or just add another marker, add another placement in that marker for that situational thing? Like, if people are really 100% sold out of inventory, I'm right there with you. I think absolutely strip it out and put it in your contact, do all of that. I want to see more people sell out. I think that we are sacrificing selling out and being efficient and even increasing CPMs, because if the demand is there, Christina, if a show had four slots on it and really performed consistently across the board, and basically was like, we have people competing for it, we're going to need to raise the rates. It's a conversation,
talk
right?
to Thomas Mancusi. Okay, somebody go find Mancusi and bring him to us, because I have been having this discussion with Mancusi for years, and the answer is, yeah, we will, like, 100% of the time. But Trevor brings up a good point,
we'll go for
which is some good shows are sold out, and we don't want to ad stack, and I agree with that. I think the question becomes, if the shows are sold out and you don't want to ad stack, but those shows that were sold out were sold in at a CPM that's far higher than whatever run of network deal that you might have in front of you, do you take it? At what point does monetization become good enough? And at what point does it become a situation where the ads are, the shows are sold out because of all the reasons that we've talked about when ads work, right? So if good shows are sold out for first run, and you want to run full catalog, and it's usually lower CPM and it's going to be topical, etc. At a certain point, are shows just sold out? I don't know the answer to that question, and I'm going to move us on here in a second, and I'd love to debate that. But, like, is there a point at which shows are sold out? Because they used to be. So why now is it, if the good shows are sold out, then they're sold out. Sold out means no more. Sold out means we're done. Sold out means no more. If I'm buying something 3, 6, 12 months embedded, or embedded in perpetuity, my expectation is, like, I'm paying enough to lock the inventory for that period of time. If a publisher needs and is seeking additional monetization for a sold out show, your pricing's too low. Which is probably not something you thought you'd hear from a buyer. But your pricing's too low.
If you want Mother's Day and it's sold out now, let's talk about 2026. Let's get you locked in. Let's build a
Let's get
custom
you locked
episode.
in for first run during this time period. We're going to run you on a, for 2 weeks, or we're going to do one every 2 weeks for 6-week test, blah, blah, blah. Let's lock you in for next year. This is working really well for this advertiser. And here's this, I've given publisher references whenever they've asked for them. Like, send advertisers in my direction. I'll have a conversation with them about why the show's a banger, and why we continue to buy it.
And I love that. I love the situational aspect of it, right? Like Mother's Day or the timely things. I think that we can be more candid in podcasting. If you pre-pended the episode and was just like, hey, it's Mother's Day, and we had this killer opportunity to do this collaboration with this company, and I'm super excited because I'm getting it for my mom, and working with them helps benefit the show. So sorry to interrupt a little bit earlier, but we'd love for you to check it out. And now back to the episode you were looking for. Like, there's so many interesting ways and things we can do. I agree with you on ad stacking, but it's the default answer shouldn't be rip something out and replace it. The default answer shouldn't be rip it out in hopes that somebody wants it later. It should be get to that, have the problem and solve the problem when you have it, not before you have it.
Yes.
And then
we do a lot of things in this industry that we're just like anticipating a problem or anticipating
solutions to problems that don't exist or haven't happened yet.
We love a solution to a problem that doesn't exist. We love an acronym that nobody in the greater advertising community understands. We love a few things in this little weird ass corner of the industry we've carved out for ourselves. But I had some questions for Brian, because I think we've hammered the point that it's important to keep post-read ads and content to ensure we keep the magic alive for the channel. Does it make sense for hosts to also do subscription models?
I think absolutely. Yeah. I mean, look, I got the bug to learn about like what happened with Britney Spears when she was like actively like finalizing the whole trial. And like I found the podcast, I think it was called Toxic, and I binged the whole thing. And I don't know if they even had an ad on it. And I spent 15 minutes trying to give them $10. I tried so hard to give them, like whatever, your Patreon for a month, maybe I'll forget it for a different month. I wanted to pay these people, right? Like if they had more stuff at that moment, I wanted to consume it. I think that, whether subscription or not, I think you made a comment earlier that like sometimes it can feel like begging. I mean, like without you, we're dead. And I think that there's some, 3-letter abbreviated podcasts that like really play on that, and it's gross. Like I think that like we need to remember there's an exchange of value here and all that. But like I've never been offended by someone reminding me that there are options for me to do more or get more or support them. And so I think subscriptions are incredibly smart, but I think they're dangerous, because I think that we're pulled in so many different directions. And this is kind of where we started on a lot of this. The first is that if I can convince you to give me $4.99 for my to listen to my podcast every month, I can convince you to buy a mattress. Like that's the truth of it, right? Yeah, and like it's like, so the idea of getting those people to come in, the people that are your most engaged people, and then removing ads, that's scary to me, because like I bet you Right Side Up and any other agency, any other brand can trace a line where performance drops when someone's subscription revenue increases. That's the real big first thing. And I don't think it necessarily needs to be the full ad load. We look at what YouTube allows you to do yourself as a publisher, and now what Spotify's doing. Spotify says if you're a premium subscriber and you are listening or watching to a video podcast, it'll be dynamically inserted ad-free. That means Spotify is not going to put an ad in there, but on YouTube and Spotify, the publisher can put their own ad in there if it is the podcast, the host, doing the ad read. That's okay. I think that that's fine in a subscription feed. You might create different ad units if you really want to and all that, but I think stripping out the things that are not yours, that are not sold in direct, I think that's okay. But I think those direct things, we got to treat them as content again. We got to get away from this world where hosts are like, I don't want to do a refresh every single episode. I only want to do one every 6 to 8 months, or 6 to 8 weeks. Like if it's the same exact ad read, if it's hilarious, I might listen to it the second time. After that, I'm catching that keyword and I'm skipping it. But if it's different, if it's fun, if they're having fun with it, I'll keep washing the dishes. I'm not going to reach for the headphone on that.
I couldn't control myself from rolling my eyes. Like my face actually, like I have this affliction where when I am super annoyed, I can't fix my face. Um that is literally, that was a sticking point for a bunch of partners that we work with to negotiate with us on terms this past year when we did 2025 terms and conditions. And I was like, let me get this straight. You're willing to die on a hill because you don't want to record an ad like once a month. Are you kidding? They're in the studio anyway. And I
Yeah.
understand, I get it. But then on the flip side, don't be surprised when I turn around and cut CPMs, or, we don't renew because performance suffers. Because I can literally, one of the first things that we train our consultants to do is when something stops working or starts declining in performance, why? Why does it happen? I actually don't even know the amount of times that it's just, oh, they reuse the ad read. Still, even though it's contracted, that they can't.
Yeah.
And some partners are saying, well, we'll only do it for like Fresh IO was
Yep.
one that I got last year. Another one was we're going to do it quarterly. And I'm like, well, we're doing weekly flights. It just make sense, Brian.
Yeah.
That's all I
Yeah.
just want.
No, I get, and
Sense.
to continue on the subscription thing, like I
Yeah.
think what really like sparked a lot of this, like I've looked into so much of the subscription stuff. I would like everybody to make money. I think that podcasting is an environment where most people who set their expectations realistically can make more money than they were making doing other things and work with people they like to work with. I think that if we set that expectation, like there's really a lot of options. I think subscriptions is a really tough place right now because if I use your external feed, it negatively impacts your ranking on Apple and Spotify. Heck, even Spotify's integration with Patreon, which actually allows it to like replace or double up on what you were already following when you add it in there. That doesn't positively impact your ranking because you're getting it from Patreon and not from what Spotify has in their directory. And that's really tough. And there's been a few podcasts recently that keep their main feed and just have a bonus feed. And Dallas Taylor from 20,000 Hertz sent me an email saying they built new bonus episodes and it cost them a lot to do it. And over time, if they stuck with it, it could have broken even if they put more effort into it. But in that moment, it was a big risk and it was a lot of effort. I think we overemphasize what bonus needs to be. Wow in the World, kids podcast, they do We Wow Weekend, where they have one of their hosts, or one of the characters, kind of just pull an older episode and just add a little bit of extra content, just a little bit of extra. And these people with these older catalogs, there's so many cool tools out there. Pull segments on it, right? Like talk about Valentine's Day is coming up. Give me a bonus episode where you talked about love and loss, right? And that what's cool about that is put the episodes in the show notes that you like the full episodes. Now maybe you're increasing downloads. Like think creatively on this. Sometimes they just want to hear you talk. Sometimes it can be super low effort. Sometimes it can be incredibly high production, but there's options and we need to listen to our audience, and we definitely should not just create a new episode at cost that is ad free and hope for the best.
Yeah. I think we keep going back to let's not hope for the best. Let's solve problems that actually exist, and let's test things that make the most sense based on the data we have available to us. I think and there's one, the contrarian argument to, going ad free is listeners might prefer it. And I think we've overwhelmingly gotten feedback over the years. And the fact that cable TV still has ads. Many of the ads,
all the streaming service,
all the streaming services are coming
it's
around.
$18 a month for Hulu without ads.
Yeah.
I don't watch enough on Hulu to make that worthwhile, but I'll tell you, when it's the new season of The Bear, I burn through it and cancel that as fast as possible. But my dad will do the ad version. My dad now has the ad version all the time. Doesn't bother him. He'll leave it on because he can access it whenever, and it's not here's a transaction, right? I think we need to get out of our own way. We're not the general audience of these podcasts. We are overeducated, opinionated people on this. And just because maybe we don't want to listen to ads doesn't mean the audience doesn't.
Yeah, I think that's Very true. And I'll close us here. Just give us a couple of minutes for
Yeah.
questions. If anybody wants to weigh in, ask any questions related to content or something that just sparked a thought, feel free to get in there. But I hope that people take away from this also that like diversified revenue streams are generally a very good idea for any for-profit business, right? The answer is not going to be only ads. The answer is not going to be only merch. The answer is not going to be only live events. And I continue to be impressed and enthused by the level of live event planning and execution that's happening in the industry. I was actually just at a conference where like Live Nation was talking about the impact that live podcasts have had on their business. So like these are all important things, but monetizing only through advertising or monetizing only through alternative streams of revenue is not the answer. My hope is that as an industry, we start to access some of these other forms of monetization so that we can actually keep the ad experience as pure as possible for people who have been listening the whole time.
I think those are great. Note to end on and go to questions.
I think so too. And if we don't have any questions, if anybody's feeling shy, or everybody's feeling shy, I should say.
This is the fun of how small and intimate podcasting is. My mom's literally in the audience of this webinar, and I just realized that.
Oh my God. Hi, Mrs. Barletta. That is like the cutest thing ever.
And I didn't even make any jokes that my mom's the only one who reads my newsletter and listens to the podcast. So, but I was just scrolling through, I was like, who's going to ask questions? But yeah, I mean, if nobody has questions now, I think what I really want to drive home is that like Christina and team are some of the most open people I've met in podcasting. And it's been really exciting to work with them. I think that like publishers often feel that it's adversarial. Christina probably is too available. So like, maybe scan it through a few other people or give her some grace on that, but like reach out to the team at Right Side Up. Everyone there, if you get questions on how any of this works or like how to succeed or like advice on how to structure this stuff, like they want you to succeed. They would like to be part of your success story.
Yeah, I mean, something that I think we put a little too much, yes, a recording of the webinar is going to be made available. And something that I do want to say is like, I think we put a little too much emphasis sometimes on distinctions between agencies, publishers, buyers, sellers. Like one of the top performers on my team is a former publisher side sales rep who, if he could deal with me and Grant Durando as clients, I was like, oh, this dude could do anything that he wants. And he's amazing. And he's been with us for 5 years. So it's like, my thing is like, these distinctions are meaningless. We are all just people in this industry trying to make a living, trying to do good for each other. And I think if we all act like that and keep podcast advertising is and podcasting as an industry is the warmest part of the industry I've ever worked in. And I've been in digital advertising since 2000. I'm going to date myself, but I've been in digital advertising since 2005 when I was.
I mean, you talk a lot about that, on how quickly those spaces go from friendly to hostile to miserable, right? To suck the life out of it and everything.
Yeah.
There's a killer question in there. Alexandra wrote, do you think part of the problem is that hosts themselves aren't aware of all of this, or misled by their network representation? I think any world where we believe that networks are misleading on purpose, I think like the bad actors have found their way out. You're seeing downsizing in this space. You're seeing companies fold. You're seeing people leave networks. I don't want to speculate on that. I'd like to just dive into the fact that I don't think
not on purpose.
Yeah.
She's saying like not on purpose, but like it's like if you don't know any better and you don't tell them, is it like omission?
When the host says back to the network, I only want to do one read, and that network is selling thousands of spots in a month, and that person's responsible for it, you just keep moving, right? Like you don't like it. It is easier if you have 10,000 hosts on a plan or 1,000 hosts on a plan, and all of them are giving you like, we're only going to do once every 6 months, and you can just round up to whatever it is. You have one conversation with the buyer versus 1,000 people you have to educate. There's not a lot of time. And so sometimes people make the wrong decision of going that way to just talk to the buyer. a lot of why I started Sounds Profitable is we do need to educate every single person. My core belief, maybe my bad take in podcasting, is we've done kind of terrible as an industry on the business side to the creators, the individual creators, because we just threw money at them and then we didn't explain to them why it went away, or how that like they have to communicate with us more than 2 weeks before our show goes live, and all of those things. And we are still digging out of that hole. But like, I think that hosts need to, if this is their business and livelihood, whether you have a network or not, there's no reason you shouldn't be more involved. There's no world where you being more involved doesn't directly earn you more money.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
So those are good closing thoughts, I think, for the webinar.
Amanda's like, get off of my Zoom.
We are at the top of the hour and I want to be respectful of everyone's time. However, we love getting feedback on the webinar, how it performed. So I'm just going to launch a quick poll in a second. So if you don't mind just rating the webinar on how it was. And while you're doing that, just wanted to share, we typically do webinars every 2 to 3 weeks. So we're going to be hosting a new, kicking off a new webinar series called Spark Sessions. And the first one is going to be with our colleague, Kevin Barry, and he's going to be presenting on how to accelerate your sales cycle with B2B advertising. So it's a great webinar. Save the date. It will take place on February 26th, and we'll send a link to that webinar form in the follow-up email that will go out tomorrow. So with that, let me close out the poll real quick. Thank you everyone for filling it out.
And thank you for not breaking it out by who was better, Christina or Brian. I would have lost that one real quick.
Of course, I would never do that. Cool. Well, thank you everyone for joining. And of course, thank you so much, Brian. Thank you so much to Christina for sharing your insights. We're so excited and happy to have you all on here. So with that, thank you everyone. Look out for an email with the recording tomorrow afternoon, and have a great rest of your day, everyone.
Thanks.
Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Good one. Bye.
Bye.